Should we begin? Uh, Hello, everybody. Welcome back again to once more Prestige sessions. My name is Pradeep Gwyn. I am an associate professor at Jindal School of Government and Public Policy, and I'll be teaching Introduction to Public Policy course to you in the very first semester. So good to see almost 30 plus of you. We'll keep this session more of a conversation on a conversational basis. So feel free to raise your hand, and I shall ask you to kind of unmute and show your face, if that is okay with you, so that I know who you are in person, and then we can take things from there on. The idea of today's Prestige session is to talk about or understand public problems through public policy, which is the topic title, so to say. But before we begin, let me give you a brief of about myself, and just in case if it helps anybody, any one of you, to kind of get a brief bio of who your instructor is going to be. Uh, so I, I grew up in Eastern India, in Jharkhand, where I did my schooling till standard 12th and moved to Delhi for my college and university. Attended Delhi University, finished my statistics as my undergrad and postgrad level courses. Worked for almost 6 years in Delhi in various research organizations, including erstwhile Planning Commission, which is now the Niti Aayog. And then I headed to Baltimore to join University of Maryland to work on my doctoral degree in public policy, and I specialized in health policy. And so while working as a doctoral scholar, I was also working as a research assistant at one of the think tanks within the university, which typically worked for state of Maryland's health department. So an analogous department would be Ministry of Health in India, or several state level ministries of health at different states within India, so to say. Then moved back to India in 2016, joined Public Health Foundation of India, which is a public health oriented research institution. Worked there for almost 2 years before joining Jindal Global University at JSGP. And since then, I've been teaching courses around public policy, environmental health, couple of statistics and econometrics related courses to undergrad and grad students. So when I say undergrad, it is going to be the bachelor's level student, grad is going to be the master's level student and all. Typically, my research intersects three major domains or areas, so to say. One is health, the other one is environment, and finally linking both these with policy. So that is where I find my solace in terms of working in my research areas. To be specific, I dabble mostly in the areas of climate change and link climate change with human health, impact on human health and health systems impact. And then within climate change, I dabble a little bit into vector-borne diseases, extreme temperature, or extreme weather events. Of late, I have started developing interest on the politics and governance on environment related issues in India. And I also have worked a little bit around children's environmental health issues. So to say, how does exposure to certain chemical components or hazardous components, for example, lead or mercury, how does that impact a child's cognitive behavior or cognitive level impact? So that is pretty much about who I am as a person. I believe that the circumstances within which someone grows up or spends time in terms of developing their capacity, both research, intellectual, and on a human basis, kind of makes a lot of difference about choosing different career options in terms of understanding where and how they want to move. And so public policy has been at the core of, I believe, knowingly or unknowingly, whatever I have done in my post my education as a professional, I would say. So at the end of the day, how certain set of policies would typically impact a certain set of people, or how policies can help people come out of a certain set of problems. So that answering or understanding those dynamics has always been central to what I have done as part of my professional career, I would say. And um, yeah, I find myself at a very good place now in terms of JGU, which provides a great deal of space in terms of experimenting with teaching as well as conducting research. So having said that, I will get into talking a little bit about understanding public problems through public policy, the matter of today's session. Meanwhile, if you have, as I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand using the hand icon, um, and unmute yourself and just show your face and pose your question. We'll keep it that way. So there are two basic components in today's conversation. One is public problem, and the other one is public policy. So uh, a public problem, again, a public problem comprises of two different words, public and problem, and similarly public policy comprises of two different words, public and policy. So suppose there is a problem, and we'll take certain examples. We'll take today's glaring or continuing example of COVID, for example. So we face a problem, for example. That problem becomes a problem for the public only if it qualifies certain notions, and certain one of the critical or important notion for any problem to become a public problem is that it should affect a larger mass of people, so to say. So policies can be drawn at multiple levels. Policies can be drawn at a household level. Policies can be drawn at a community, a small community level, let's say. Policies can be drawn at a district, state, geography, national, international level, so on and so forth. So not all problems are typically called public problem. I hope you would agree with me on that. So if you have a problem at a family level, that is typically will not comprise of what is called a public problem, unless that problem starts affecting or influencing a larger mass or a larger body of people, right? So when we have a public problem, there has to be certain solutions that needs to be figured out to be able to address that public problem. And the way we talk about solutions, these solutions are typically bracketed under or kept under what is called a set of policy or policies, right? So that is where we will get into the heart of today's conversation about how can we explain or understand a particular problem, which is a public problem, through a set of solutions or policies which are essentially going to be called public policies. Again, you can have certain policies at your household level, which will not be called public policy for that matter. So you have private policies, for example, a set of policies which are which govern a set of people under a certain section, let's say a private entity. So if you're working somewhere, or if some of you have worked somewhere, there would be certain set of policies that would govern how would you work in that particular workplace. So that again will be part of what is called a private policy. But if you kind of enlarge that scope of people working across different sectors, across different cities, and how those people should be managed within a workplace, how your set of what kind of rules there should be to be able to govern certain kind of people working in certain sections, that becomes a public policy, right? So the basic understanding, I hope by now should be clear to you about what problem is going to be defined as a public problem and what policies are going to be defined as public policies. So whenever you have a set of problem, you would, which is affecting a larger body of people, a larger community of people, there has to be a certain set of alternatives or solutions that needs to be identified and needs to be implemented, as we say. So some of these terms you will find it very these terms will occur more than once when you are actually attending or taking one or more of the courses as part of your coursework towards earning your MAPP degree from JGU. So there has to be a certain set of solutions which needs to be implemented, and there has to be certain players or actors or stakeholders who will implement those solutions for you, and so on and so forth. So that is how one typically understands about what a policy or what a public problem is through a set of policy solutions. So let me get right away into by taking the current pandemic as a case in point. I hope all of you will agree with me that the current pandemic situation posed by COVID-19 is a public problem, right? It is simply a public problem because it is affecting a larger mass of people. In fact, the whole of the world is now getting affected by this virus. And since it is getting affected, since the larger population base of Mother Earth is getting affected by this, it is becoming a problem for the larger public, which needs solutions in terms of policies. So again, not all problems typically gain that status of being called as a public problem, primarily because every society, and when we talk about society, let's equate that with any government, be it state level government or central government. That any government or any entity typically works under one major objective and one major limitation, and that limitation is limited access to resources. And whenever we talk about resources, we are essentially talking about in terms of what money what dollar value or what money value does the government has under their disposal to be able to address a particular set of problem. So we always are going to work under some resource constraint setup. So at the end of the day, we cannot address all the problems that are affecting our society. So we need to pick up or typically those problems gets picked up which has or which are affecting a larger body of people or which has a more damaging impact, right? So right now government across the globe or governments across the globe, they are all trying to kind of utilize or minimize the resources or optimize the use of resources in terms of addressing the problems that are emanating from COVID, for example. In terms of how many people should get tested, what should be done in terms of having people address the problem when they are getting affected in terms of getting tested. Uh, so I'm getting a comment that are you able to all hear me properly? Can I?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, great. I just heard from someone maybe they or she doesn't have better Wi-Fi network. So thank you for confirming that. So I was saying that each government across the globe, the pressing need today that they are addressing is, of course, the problems that are coming out or emanating because of COVID, right? So they have to kind of understand how they want to channel their resources, in what ways to be able to minimize the damage that is caused because of this spread of this virus in the community or within the population. So what is happening right now, you would see that other problems that are also equally affecting many societies are not being talked about, right? Primarily because there is a more swelling or compelling problem in terms of COVID, which needs to be addressed first. So what I'm trying to say is any society will have n number of problems that is affecting them, but not all those problems will be labeled as what is called a public problem. So to be able to be called a public problem, again, there has to be certain characteristics that that particular problem is affecting a larger body of people, so on and so forth. The damage that that problem is doing is much faster compared to any other problems, for example. And so there has to be certain set of solutions. So whenever we implement, so solutions can be something that a set of actions are taken, that can be a solution, and a set of solution or steps that is not taken, that is also a solution. So typically a policy which is called a public policy is in a very simple term, as we say, is something that the government chooses to do, and at the same time, so that can be called public policy. So certain set of rules that governs a certain set of people, that can be called public policy. But at the same time, if the government chooses not to do anything, that is also what is called public policy. So public policies or policies are not always something that needs to happen or solutions that needs to be implemented. It can also be not doing anything. That is also a solution, so to say, that the government is adopting to be able to address a problem. Uh, Whenever we are going to, or whenever we are talking about public policy, we essentially talk about what government does or it does not, right? And we have to understand about how these policy formations take place, whether the policies are contextualized or not, meaning a certain set of rules may work best at one section or in one part of the globe, but may not work in other part of the globe, right? So whenever we are talking about public policy, it needs to be contextualized. And then there are certain steps or stages that are typically used in terms of applying public policy, in terms of so these would include, I'll not get into the details of all of them because they otherwise are going to be part of our course discussion, but just to kind of touch upon them, that you will again agree that to any problem that we have, we can have very many solutions to that particular problem. What a public policy does is it will weigh several of those solutions, which are typically called alternatives, and you weigh them on different yardsticks, and then you think about implementing one or not many different alternatives, but very focused alternative that you develop and implement, and then you basically evaluate after certain time gap that whether something that you have implemented, the policies that you have implemented, whether it is producing the desired result or not, right? So if we pick up COVID, for example, we can say that okay, the government initiated lockdown as certain measures at the very beginning. We can think about whether those measures were effective or not in terms of containing this problem. So the debate can be on both sides basically. And whenever you are going to debate about a policy alternative, a policy solution, it has to be debated on the basis of certain facts. It should be objectively kind of argued, and not like you have any subject your own opinion. You can't kind of label that, but you have to have a very fact-based, evidence-based opinion to be able to make arguments, right? So whether the government was correct in terms of implementing lockdowns, whether the government was correct in addressing one aspect of the problem and overlooking other aspects of the problem. So those are basically the debates that typically happen within the space of policy making or public policy making, so to say, right? So once the first few cases were identified in the country, for example, the kind of measures that government took, did it have any spillover effect or detrimental effect on one section of the society versus other section of the society, in terms of migratory population, so to say, in terms of people who walked for several kilometers, several 100 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers to reach their native towns because they were not finding support, for example. So what I'm trying to say is there can be multiple aspects or perspectives from which a particular problem can be, or should be rather, not can be, should be explored. Um, and so whenever we are trying to address a certain set of policies, that needs to be addressed in a holistic manner. And that is where public policy stands out compared to a particular discipline. So whenever we are talking about a public problem, you can only address a particular public problem by looking at that problem in a holistic manner. There can be certain aspects to that problem which is going to be more important compared to the other aspects. So for example, maybe the economic aspect to a particular public problem is weighing more compared to the cultural aspect or the behavioral aspect, or let's say the social aspect to that particular problem, right? So but it does not mean that since economic aspect of a particular public problem is weighing more, we are going to completely disregard the other aspects of the problem. So to say, the cultural, the behavioral, the social, so on and so forth, the historical. So what I'm trying to say is, whenever you are planning to address or think about alternatives, you should draw upon those alternatives in a holistic manner to be able to address a particular public problem, right? Uh, so that is something that I would say is the importance of understanding a particular public problem, and how you would use the science and art of policy making to be able to address a particular public problem. Uh, I'll stop here for the moment, and I'll be happy to take questions or comments from the audience. Questions in terms of whether what I said did make sense to you, and so on. Rana asked this question, whether we are using policy solutions and policy alternatives interchangeably. Yes, to answer your question. Solutions or alternatives are one or the same in the domain of public policy that we talk about. So if there aren't any more questions for now, we can talk a little bit more. Uh, so public policy is something at a 40,000 feet level, so to say. Whenever we are, and then within public policy, there can be multiple sector driven policies. So you may have heard about finance policy or education policy or health policy or environment policy, and so on and so forth, right? So these are sector specific policies which typically will be under the larger rubric of public policy. So for example, we now have a national education policy, a draft document of that, or that policy has been implemented for that matter. So just by the name of education policy, it should tell you that this particular policy is addressing one specific aspect of our living, which is education, right? And similarly, there can be health policy. Uh, there are policies which can be applied at state level. There can be policies which can be applied at national level. There can be policies which can be applied at international level, right? So depending on the type of the problem, how many across which geography a particular problem is affecting a particular set of people, demands policies to be drawn and implemented at that level of geography, right? So there can be certain set of problem which, let's say, is going to be very specific to one particular state, right? So the state government will take initiative in terms of developing policies to address the problem of that particular problem, which is very centric to a particular state. So that policy may not be applicable to other states, right? Similarly, if you look at the problem of, let's say, terrorism, or if you look at the problem of pollution, let's say, or global warming, let's say. So there are certain set of policies which can be both international as well as national. So what a particular country is doing specifically in terms of addressing the environmental issues, that is one. There can be one set of policies. The other set of policies can be what a particular country is doing vis-a-vis other countries at a global level in terms of addressing, let's say, the challenge posed by climate change, the global climate change or global warming for that matter, right? So policies will be placed at within different contexts. Policies will be placed within different geographies, within different entities, that is going to affect communities within that jurisdictional domain, so to say. So if there are policies which are internationally governed, it will mean that a larger body of people across different countries are getting affected, and so it needs to be governed at a international level. Does it make sense? Yeah, so Suparna asked this question that not taking steps or not working on particular solution to a problem is also can it also be labeled as policies? um, uh, while while it sounds like it is not a policy, you will figure out in a couple of weeks from now that yeah, that is also a set of policy or a set of action, or so to say inaction in this case. So if I choose to not do something, let's say, for a particular problem, then that is a conscious effort that I am making. When I say I'm talking about a particular government. So it is on part of that government who is consciously making that effort to not do anything. And so that is also clubbed under or is known as part of public policy. So it is always going to be government action oblique inaction, in a very simple language, that public policy is always going to be inaction or action taken by the government. That is what I hope that helps, Suparna. Um, Arshiman, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It is Archishman, sir.
Archishman, thank you. So you have a longish question. Is it okay if I ask you to kind of quickly kind of talk through your question?
Yeah, sure, sir. My question is, there are lots of policies has been introduced. Among them, the government of India has recently introduced the educational policy. And
Correct.
is it really, yeah, is it really possible is it really possible to free from any political agenda, from any policy making or any sort of ideas which is going to be implemented in our society? It's free from any political agendas. Is it really possible to practice so?
Uh, okay. Good question. So I would say that um ultimately, whenever a set of policy alternatives are initiated, uh, 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 the government at the helm is going to kind of do that, right? So, uh, it may majorly look like it is it is from one political ideology, but it need not be always the case. So I'll give you an example. So let's say we are going to talk about national security, right? So national security is something that will have a consensus across all political parties or all the entities for that matter. So whatever steps are typically taken or implemented to address the problem that is emanating from, let's say, that is affecting the security of the nation, would look like, in most case or in all likelihood, a political kind of decision, right? Whereas there could be certain policies for that matter, and again I'm not sure. So if there has been talks about several state governments in India changing the course curriculum of certain subjects over various time points, right? So this is a policy level change that one or more of the state governments had initiated, right, and implemented for that matter. Now, whether that is doing any good, whether that is doing more damage, that needs to be independently and impartially kind of reviewed, and you can provide a justification of whether something that is being done by a particular state government or multiple state governments in terms of altering the course content, whether that is rightly representing the fact or not. So if it is not rightly representing the fact, then one way of putting that kind of change that is being brought at it, you can say that yes, there could be a political tone to that kind of policy change. Whereas in the case of national security, and many others, so for example, problems like air pollution, or problems centered around climate change, for example, if the government is taking step by taking into confidence all or major stakeholders, right? Stakeholders are people or interest groups or groups or organizations who have certain role or interest towards a particular problem, right? So if the government is doing something by taking into consideration a large body of stakeholders, then possibly they are doing something in a apolitical manner. Are you satisfied with that answer, Archishman? Did I pronounce your name correctly this time?
Yes, sir. Always. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your explanations.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, so Nishu asked a question about what is my take on populism versus public policy. Okay, I'll try not to get into what is my opinion, just for the benefit of for all of us. I don't want to get into the debate of what I think is right. Again. Or what I think is wrong. That should not be the objective of this session. Of course, for example, the report that you're talking about, Nishu, one would expect or hope that the report, the findings, or the arguments that the report is making is going to be very much objectively driven. Whether since it has not been implemented, right, and it has not been implemented because of, as you are writing, public pressure. So evidently there are certain interest groups here who do not see to gain in a positive way upon this report being implemented, right? And so what is happening is it is continuing to damage the larger ecosystem, the environment of Western Ghats. And it's not only about damage that is caused in the Western Ghats. I mean, you see a lot of damage being done to our environment, just outside where you live, for that matter, right? In multiple ways, and so there has been multiple solutions, set of solutions that has come across over multiple time points. Several of them have been implemented, others have not been implemented for multiple reasons, whether there are enough resources to implement those alternatives, whether there is opposition from stakeholders, whether there is merit in implementing those alternatives. Sometimes those alternatives might sound very feasible on paper, but when it actually comes to term in terms of implementing it on the ground, it might look very different. So yeah, to get back to your basic question, Nishu, about what I think, I would refrain from talking about what I think, but um, it should be about what we as a society think about what is happening and whether what is happening is correct or not. And you as a prospective student of public policy, and in 2 years down the line, where most of you are going to kind of provide inputs to one or many organizations, or even if you're working independently in terms of trying to address the societal problem, you have to continuously ask and engage with understanding and asking this question about what what is being done. Is it being done in a correct manner or not, right? uh, or how could that have been improved, or something of that sort. So these are the typical things that you should always keep in mind as a policy analyst, as someone who is going to be a major change force, I would say. Someone who is going to be a change factor, initiator of change factor in the society while addressing multiple societal problems. Does that make sense, Nishu? I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer your question directly in terms of what I think for the reasons I said. I hope you understand that part.
Yes, sir.
Shubham, you have a question? Yeah. Again, Shubham, to answer your question, at the end of the day, to bring about any change in the society, there are a lot of factors. Political willingness is one of the major factor. Yes. So you need not go out to find distant to kind of figure out. Within our country, you will find certain sections or certain areas of our country where, because of political willingness, they have been able to address certain issues, be it environment related, be it health related, whereas in certain areas they have not been able to. This area of research is something that I'm getting involved more currently, where I'm trying to understand what are those typical factors within our politics and within our governance that aids in finding solution to one set of problems. It can be environmental, health, so on and so forth. But at the same time, we find that the same set of people who are trying to find solution to same one set of problem, the same set of people are not willing to consider finding solutions or alternatives to other set of problem. So what kind of willingness, or what are the factors beyond willingness is there to address one particular problem or not? Does that help, Shubham?
Yes, absolutely, sir. Thank you.
Sure. So Noyonika, you are asking a question: when attempting to create public policy solutions, how important is it to have correct representation in the policy making committee? I personally think it's very logical to do so, and I would appreciate any transparency on this part of the policy making process. For example, when it comes to the National Education Policy draft, where education professionals consulted. Again, excellent question, and I'm glad that you guys are asking some very pertinent question, which makes me to think and believe that you guys are thinking in the right direction. So in policy lingo, Nayonika, we talk about those kind of representations being talked about in terms of stakeholders. Okay, so if you're okay with the term stakeholders, I'll continue talking in that term, or any other representation that we are talking about. You have to understand, or we have to understand that whenever someone is trying to bring in any kind of policy change, they are working under a lot of restrictions in terms of resources, in terms of time frame, in terms of reachability, so on and so forth. So one important aspect of bringing any policy change is whether or not that policy has been vetted by the stakeholders who are going to be affected by those policies once implemented, right? If you're asking this question of whether education professionals were consulted or not, okay, I'm not sure how to answer that question. You have to kind of think through this a little bit. The fact was, the government shared the draft education policy with the public on day one. Let's say this is all hypothetical. I'm saying hypothetical in the sense, in terms of days I'm talking about. So the government shares with the larger public on day one the draft national education policy, and provides a window period of 1 month or 2 months for the general public, so to say, to revert back to the government in terms of any comments or suggestions that they have on the draft national education policy. So you have to understand a question: is that time frame a good enough time frame for people to provide suggestions or feedback to government? One. Two, if you're sharing the national education policy with people online, you are actually only reaching out to one section of the society who has access to internet, right? There might be many educationists today who are still old school, who may not be able to read the document after downloading it unless they have a paper copy of that draft document, right? So did the government do it correctly in terms of getting inputs from people? Again, I would shy away from sharing my opinion here. So these are the kind of questions that you should be asking, or anyone who is a prospective policy analyst should be asking, and you should be doing a very objective check in terms of using certain yardsticks of how much time was available, was it available, or was the draft policy document available to major section of the population, where many educationists included in that as part of stakeholder consultation or not? So based on all these aspects, one would say that yes, whether or not the government did a right move, or was there any scope for improvement in terms of improving the content of national education policy. Does that help, Nayonika?
Yeah, it does. I think that that's a very, I mean, the questions that you raised were anyhow there, but I think it's nice to have them solidified in this sort of a sense.
Great. So I'll move on to Purva's question. How can citizen engagement help the government in understanding public problems and eventually help in public policy making? And at what level India stands in citizen level engagement? Okay, I'm not sure how to answer the second part of your question. So I do not have a statistic or a number, so to say, to point out where does India stand in terms of citizen level engagement. There are certain aspects where our engagement, citizen level engagement, would ace, but on some other aspects our engagement would be very, very dismal, or it would be to the extent that we don't even care, right? So there is a wide gap, I would say, Purva. But how can citizen engagement help? Citizen engagement would typically help any government or anyone who is planning to draw upon addressing a public problem in terms of trying to figure out or to hear from the horse's mouth, so to say, right? How is one particular section of the society, how will they be affected, right? If the government is getting to know from that particular community firsthand, and if the government is empathetic towards that kind of suggestion that is coming to them for any particular problem, they or any particular incumbent or any government will be able to do a lot of justice in terms of trying to understand, adapt, and integrate contextual level issues when they are trying to address a policy solution. See, you have to understand that public policy has always been there in any society. We are learning, or we are learning this course in terms of a degree in public policy in India and in Southeast Asia, which is starting very recently. But public policy has always been there, and mostly it has been, so to say, a Western concept. But not really a Western concept again. If you look at certain examples, so I'll give you a very small example. Maybe you can you may want to watch a video about this particular. I will have to share that information later on. I don't remember, but this one particular homemaker from US, from one particular community, which was residing just next to a hazardous material dump yard, how she was able to galvanize the impact or the negative impact of that hazardous material to their community, and how that became a national level problem, and how she was able to kind of bring in federal level or national level changes, right? That is what citizenship involvement can bring in. So in our country we have we have examples in form of Chipko movement, right? And several others for that matter, Narmada Andolan, and so on and so forth. So how much can we kind of integrate citizen involvement, to answer your question, to a very, very greater extent? It again depends on how much the government is willing to listen. If the government is willing to listen, and if they are making space, then the solutions that are going to come up as in terms of policy solutions or alternatives, that is going to have a more lasting and sustainable effect. Does that help, Purva?
Yes, sir. I've always had this kind of a question that are the political agendas simply set single-handedly by the government in power, or the voices from the grassroots are actually heard? So the
No,
example
it is going to be in a mixed way, but any problem, government, it is mostly going to come from, it is mostly going to take a bottom-up approach. So most of those problems are going to come from grassroots, unless the government is very dictatorial and wants to kind of implement something against the wish of the largest section of the population. So you have that kind of system as well, or there has been that kind of system as well, right? If you look at, if you dig a little bit deep into history, you will find a lot of that kind of evidence as well. Make sense,
okay, sir.
Purva?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so Nishu asks this interesting question about systems thinking, quote, today's problem came from yesterday's solution. Yeah, so to say, because we have a certain set of solutions to a problem that we are facing today, and maybe a certain set of solutions that we are implementing to address today's problem can become the source of problem for tomorrow. Very much, yes. So yes, I completely agree with you on that, Mansi. Any more questions?
Hello. Sir.
Yeah.
Hello. Sir, my name is Sandeep.
Yeah,
I mean,
Sandeep.
My question is, I mean, very much related to this, I mean, environmental and climate change.
Okay.
I mean, I think, sir, in India, we are yet to contain the virus. And I was thinking, are we ready to face the next challenge as a developing country, like the climate change and the impact of it? Because I think, sir, I mean, we lack resources, or maybe it is political willingness. Because for an example, I can give you that we have the Central Pollution Control Board. I mean, that has few hundred employees compared to, I mean, around 14,000 in the US Environmental Protection Agency. So
Okay.
do we need better institutional mechanism to address the future challenges? Because I mean, in COVID-19, no one foreseen this will be happening to the globe. Because, and I think, I mean, the climate change would be disastrous. How do you think we can address this issue?
Multiple aspects need to be considered. One aspect that you just talked about is about human resources, right? And human resources in terms of our Office of Central Pollution Control Board has X number of human resources compared to the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA of US, the federal government, right, which has several times more manpower, right?
Yeah.
So that is just one yardstick. I forget your Sandeep, right? Sandeep.
Yes, sir. Mine.
So that is just one yardstick, and an important yardstick. So to answer your question, are we prepared to kind of address the next level of challenges that will emanate from climate change? We'll rest. I'll rest my answer to a more in-person conversation. Again, I will shy away from pronouncing my own opinion here, because I don't think that is the actual objective of this session. But to take understand from your perspective of what you think. So just to answer your question or address your concern, I think what you're raising is a very, very pertinent issue. Manpower is just one area. I'll give you another example. So I'm currently working with another colleague here within university on vector-borne diseases. And so a certain set of manpower is required to manage vector-borne diseases in terms of malaria, dengue, and so on, right? You have to have these many number of people to do the fogging, to do fumigation, to do canvassing, and so on, provide treatment, so on and so forth, right? But our findings suggest that there is a severe shortage of manpower at all levels that is involved in vector-borne disease management. So yeah, to answer, you can right away get the answer about how people are going to make a change or difference. If having adequate number of people will be able to address the problem or not, yes. What it takes for the government to have those many number of people, that is something that is a policy level problem, and that is where you have to think a little bit more, or one has to think a little bit more. Does that make sense, Sandeep?
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Yeah. Any more questions? Okay, if there are none, I would say that it was my pleasure speaking with you, and again I take this opportunity to welcome you to our program. We are going to hopefully have the first few weeks of our classes online, and I'm not sure whether we are going to have in-person level classes or not. That the university is going to decide and let all of us know. But if you have any questions in particular about what we talked today, you can certainly reach out to me. Lalit is also there as one person whom you can get in touch base with, or else you can find my email on JSGP's website. Otherwise, it is just P as in Pradeep and my last name as in GUIN. So it is pguin@jgu.edu.in, and I'll be happy to take your, or kind of get into another level of conversation if you have any. Is that fine?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, pleasure. Lalit, are we good to kind of conclude the session?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Have a good
Thank
day
you so
and
much,
stay
sir.
safe.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
You too have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you, sir.